Well now, good evening, friends. Andy Taylor here. What if I told you that a dog appeared in Mayberry one morning and sat outside an abandoned house for 3 days without eating or drinking, refusing to leave, and when I finally discovered why, the story of loyalty I uncovered taught our whole town a lesson about love, loss, and the bonds that transcend even death? This is a story about devotion that doesn't end, about memory that persists, and about how sometimes the greatest teachers of loyalty have 4 legs instead of 2. It started on a Wednesday morning in September of 1959, when Mrs. Henderson called my office sounding concerned. "Sheriff Taylor," she said, "there's a dog sitting outside the old Thomas house on Elm Street. He's been there since yesterday morning, just sitting by the front gate. He won't move, won't eat anything I've put out for him. I think something might be wrong with him." The Thomas house had been empty for about 5 years, ever since old Mr. Thomas had passed away. It was a modest place, well maintained by the bank that now owned it, but clearly unoccupied. I drove over to Elm Street to see what was going on. When I arrived, I found exactly what Mrs. Henderson had described. Sitting by the front gate was a large dog, looked to be a German Shepherd mix, probably 8 or 9 years old, based on the gray around his muzzle. He was sitting upright, perfectly still, staring at the front door of the house. His eyes never wavered. He didn't acknowledge my approach, didn't turn his head when I spoke to him. He just sat there, waiting. I knelt down beside him. "Hey there, boy," I said gently. "What are you doing here?" The dog's ears twitched slightly at my voice, but he didn't look at me. His gaze remained fixed on that front door, as if he expected someone to open it at any moment. Mrs. Henderson came out of her house next door. "I've been watching him since yesterday morning," she said. "He just showed up and sat down in that exact spot. I brought him water and some food, but he won't touch it. I tried to coax him away, but he won't budge. It's the strangest thing, Sheriff. He's not aggressive, not sick that I can tell. He's just waiting for something." I examined the dog more closely. He was thin, his coat dusty from travel, his paws worn as if he'd walked a long distance. But Mrs. Henderson was right. He didn't seem sick or injured, just utterly focused on that house, on that door, with a patience and stillness that was almost unnatural. I tried calling him away, patting my leg, offering him the food Mrs. Henderson had brought. Nothing worked. He simply sat there, unmoving except for the slow blink of his eyes and the slight rise and fall of his breathing. There was something profoundly sad about the scene. This old dog keeping vigil outside an empty house, waiting for something that clearly wasn't coming. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, "tell me about Mr. Thomas. Did he have a dog?" She thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "He had a German Shepherd for years. Beautiful dog, very well trained. Mr. Thomas was a widower, lived alone, and that dog was his constant companion. When Mr. Thomas died 5 years ago, I assumed the dog had been taken by relatives or gone to a shelter. I never saw him after the funeral." I looked at the dog again with new understanding. "You think this is the same dog?" Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. "It could be," she said. "The age would be about right. But Sheriff, that was 5 years ago. Where has this dog been? And why would he come back now?" Those were good questions. I decided to do some investigating. I went to the courthouse and looked up the records on Mr. Thomas. His full name was William Thomas, aged 72 when he died in May of 1954. He'd been a veteran, served in World War I. No children. Wife had passed 10 years before him. The house had been willed to a nephew in another state who'd sold it to the bank. No mention of a dog in the estate records. I called the nephew, a man named Robert Thomas living in Tennessee. Yes, Uncle William had a dog, he told me. Name was Duke. Beautiful animal. When Uncle William died, I tried to take Duke with me, but the dog was too old for the long car trip and seemed distressed leaving the house. A family friend who lived about 30 miles away said they'd take him, give him a good home for his final years. Fellow named Harris. That was 5 years ago. I haven't thought about Duke since, to be honest. I thanked him and tracked down Mr. Harris. He confirmed the story. Yes, I took Duke after William died, he said. Good dog, but he was heartbroken. Wouldn't eat much, seemed depressed. Then about 3 days ago, he disappeared from my yard. I looked for him, but couldn't find him. I figured at his age, he might have wandered off to die somewhere quiet. Dogs do that sometimes. 3 days ago. That matched exactly when the dog had appeared at the Thomas house, which meant this old dog had somehow found his way back to his original home, back to the place where his owner had lived, traveling 30 miles at the age of about 13 or 14. The dedication, the determination, the sheer force of memory and love required for that journey was staggering. I went back to Elm Street. The dog was still there, still sitting in the same position, still staring at the door. By now, word had spread through town, and a small group of neighbors had gathered to watch this strange vigil. Opie had come with me this time, curious about the dog everyone was talking about. "Pa," he said quietly, "why won't he move?" I knelt down beside my son. "I think he's waiting for someone," I said. "Someone who lived in this house a long time ago. But that person isn't coming back, is he?" Opie asked, understanding dawning in his eyes. "No, son, he's not. Mr. Thomas died 5 years ago. But this dog doesn't understand that. Or maybe he does understand, but he's waiting anyway, hoping." Opie looked at the dog with tears forming. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," he said. "We have to help him, Pa. We can't just let him sit here waiting for someone who's never coming home." I agreed, but helping wasn't going to be simple. The dog clearly had no intention of leaving voluntarily. I tried again to coax him away, but he remained immovable. Aunt Bee came by with fresh water and some good meat scraps, hoping the smell would tempt him. The dog's nose twitched, showing he could smell the food, but he didn't look away from the door. His discipline, his focus, his loyalty were absolute. By the third day, I was genuinely worried. The dog hadn't eaten or drunk anything in 72 hours. At his age, that kind of deprivation could be fatal. I called Doc Roberts, who sometimes treated animals when the veterinarian was unavailable. Doc came and examined the dog as best he could without moving him. "He's dehydrated and weak," Doc said. "If he doesn't eat and drink soon, he's not going to make it. But I'll tell you something, Andy. I've never seen devotion like this. This dog loved his owner with every fiber of his being. He's come home to wait for him, and nothing is going to move him until he's ready." That evening, I sat on the porch of the Thomas house with Opie, both of us watching the dog as the sun set. Opie had been quiet for a long time, thinking. "Pa," he finally said, "what if we opened the door? What if we let him go inside? Maybe if he sees Mr. Thomas isn't in there, he'll understand and be willing to leave." It was worth a try. I got the key from the bank and opened the front door of the Thomas house for the first time in 5 years. The moment that door swung open, the dog's demeanor changed dramatically. He stood up for the first time in 3 days, his stiff legs shaking slightly, and walked slowly through the gate, up the path, and into the house. We followed him inside. The house was exactly as Mr. Thomas had left it, frozen in time. Furniture covered with sheets, a thin layer of dust on everything, photographs on the mantel, Mr. Thomas's reading chair by the window. The dog walked through each room slowly, methodically, sniffing carefully. He went to the chair and laid down beside it, his head resting on the floor where Mr. Thomas's feet would have been. He closed his eyes for a moment, and I swear I saw a shudder run through his body, as if something inside him was finally acknowledging what his heart had refused to accept. After a long moment, the dog stood up again and walked back outside. But this time, he didn't return to his vigil at the gate. This time, he walked over to where Opie was standing and sat down beside him, leaning slightly against my son's leg. Opie looked up at me with hope and question in his eyes. "Can we take him home, Pa? Can we give him a place to stay?" I looked at this old, tired dog who'd just walked 30 miles to say goodbye to his owner, who'd kept faith for 5 years, who'd demonstrated a loyalty so pure and complete it had moved an entire neighborhood. How could I say no? We took Duke home that evening. Aunt Bee prepared a gentle meal for him, nothing too rich for his empty stomach. He ate slowly, carefully, as if remembering how. Then he drank deeply from the water bowl we'd set out. Afterward, he followed Opie to his room and lay down on a rug beside the bed. For the first time in 3 days, the dog rested. Over the following weeks, Duke became part of our family. He was gentle with Opie, patient and protective. The sadness never entirely left his eyes, but there was a new peace there too, an acceptance. He'd made his pilgrimage, said his goodbye, and now he was allowing himself to move forward. Opie learned responsibility caring for Duke, feeding him, walking him, brushing his coat. And Duke taught Opie about loyalty, about devotion that doesn't demand anything in return, about love that persists beyond reason or hope. One evening, about a month after Duke had come to live with us, Opie asked me a question. "Pa, do you think Duke knows Mr. Thomas is really gone now? Or does he still hope?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think he knows," I said. "I think maybe he knew all along. But sometimes, when we love someone deeply, we need to say goodbye in our own way, in our own time." Duke needed to go back to that house, needed to walk through those rooms one more time, needed to sit where he used to sit with his owner. It wasn't about not understanding death. It was about honoring life, about honoring the relationship he'd had. That's what loyalty means at its deepest level. It's not just being there for someone when they're present. It's remembering them when they're gone, honoring their memory, keeping faith even when there's no practical reason to do so. Duke lived with us for 2 more years. Peaceful years where he was loved and cared for. He seemed content, though every now and then I'd see him staring off into the distance with that same focused look he'd had outside the Thomas house, and I knew he was remembering. When Duke passed away quietly in his sleep in the spring of '61, Opie was heartbroken, but also grateful. We buried him in our backyard, and Opie made a small marker. Duke, faithful friend, who taught us what loyalty means. The story of Duke spread throughout Mayberry and beyond. People were moved by his journey, by his 3-day vigil, by the depth of devotion he'd shown. Mrs. Henderson said it was the most touching thing she'd ever witnessed. That image of an old dog sitting patiently outside his owner's house, waiting with infinite faith. The story made me think about the nature of loyalty and what we can learn from animals about devotion. Duke had no complex reasons for his actions. He didn't sit outside that house because of duty or obligation, or because someone told him to. He did it because he loved William Thomas purely and completely, and that love compelled him to make a journey most humans would consider impossible for a dog his age. His loyalty wasn't conditional. It didn't end when Mr. Thomas died. It didn't diminish over 5 years of separation. It remained absolute, unwavering, a testament to the depth of feeling animals are capable of. We often talk about what humans can teach animals: training, commands, behaviors. But Duke reminded us that animals have profound lessons to teach us too. About living in the moment while honoring the past. About devotion that doesn't calculate cost or benefit. About love that persists not because it will be rewarded, but simply because it exists. In our human relationships, we could learn something from Duke's example. How often do we stay loyal only as long as it's convenient? How often do our commitments waver when they're tested? Duke's commitment to William Thomas never wavered, not even when it meant a 30-mile journey on old legs, not even when it meant sitting for 3 days without food or water, not even when the object of his devotion was 5 years gone. That's loyalty in its purest form. Got well now. That's the story of Duke, the dog who wouldn't leave, who traveled 30 miles to sit vigil outside his owner's empty house, and who taught a small town about the nature of true devotion. It's a reminder that the most powerful examples of loyalty sometimes come not from grand human gestures, but from the simple, pure love of a faithful dog. And it's a reminder that the bonds we form in life, whether with people or animals, can transcend time, distance, even death itself. If you're fortunate enough to have a loyal dog in your life, remember Duke. Remember that their devotion is real, their love is pure, and their faithfulness is absolute. They deserve the same loyalty in return. And if you've lost a beloved pet, remember that the love you shared doesn't end. It persists in memory, in the lessons learned, in the way your life was changed by knowing them. Duke waited 5 years and traveled 30 miles because love doesn't recognize impossibility. Love simply persists. Come back and visit again real soon, friends. Until then, this is Andy Taylor saying good night from Mayberry. Remember, the greatest teachers of loyalty sometimes have 4 legs and a wagging tail. Treat them with the devotion they show you, and you'll be a better person for it. Take care now.